Most billionaires reveal their plans in boardrooms, but this powerful grandmother chose a mop and bucket instead. For 3 long months, Eleanor Whitmore, respected chairwoman of the Whitmore Law Group, had been away from the spotlight. But when she returned, it wasn't with a press release or grand entrance. Instead, she disguised herself as a janitor, blending into the very hallways of the firm her family had built. She had a plan, and it was far more personal than corporate strategy. Eleanor was on a quiet mission to observe how the company functioned behind the scenes, and more importantly, to find a wife for her elusive grandson, Nathan Whitmore, the heir to the firm. Nathan was brilliant, charming, and notoriously private. Few at the office even knew what he looked like, and his name carried more mystery than fame. As the staff buzzed with gossip about his rumored arrival, none of them realized the man would walk among them in disguise. Meanwhile, Eleanor, dressed in worn-out clothes and a watch that looked like it came from a flea market, slipped through the building unnoticed until a group of junior employees began mocking her. Their laughter echoed down the hallway as they pointed at her faded uniform and cheap accessories. But before their jeers could escalate further, a poised young attorney named Clara Jenkins stepped in, defending the cleaning lady with a confidence that silenced the room. From her quiet corner, Eleanor watched the exchange closely. And in that very moment, she saw what she had come looking for, not just kindness, but strength. Clara had no idea, but she had just caught the attention of the most powerful woman in the building. Later that afternoon, Eleanor Whitmore spotted Clara again, this time, sitting quietly at her desk, immersed in a stack of legal briefs. The office had settled into a calm rhythm after the earlier commotion, but the memory of Clara's act of courage lingered like a warm ember in Eleanor's chest. Seizing the moment, she approached, still dressed in her janitor's uniform, clutching a rag in one hand and curiosity in the other. "Excuse me, dear," she said in a soft voice, clearing her throat. Clara looked up and immediately offered the older woman a kind smile. "Of course, ma'am. How can I help you?" Eleanor took a seat across from her, placing her cleaning supplies neatly at her feet. She leaned in just slightly, her eyes sharp beneath her wrinkled brow. "I couldn't help but overhear what those other women said to you," she began, her voice laced with warmth, but also purpose. "You handled it with a lot of grace. That says something about you." Clara chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks, but to be honest, I'm used to it. People tend to mistake kindness for weakness, and they don't like it when you don't stay in your place." Eleanor's eyes glinted. "Are you seeing anyone?" she asked bluntly, catching Clara off guard. The young woman blinked, then laughed, thinking it must be some harmless old lady banter. "That's very kind of you, but no, I'm not really looking. Love hasn't exactly been fair to me," Clara replied. She paused, then added with surprising openness, "My last relationship ended when I caught him cheating with someone from this very office, no less. Since then, I've focused on my career." Eleanor's expression softened, but there was no pity in her eyes, only quiet calculation. "I raised my grandson after his parents passed," she said gently. "He's a good man, brilliant, loyal, but shy and perhaps too cautious for his own good. I want him to meet someone who sees past the family name and the legacy, someone like you." Clara smiled politely, clearly touched, but unsure whether the woman was serious. "That's a lovely thought, but I think he deserves someone who's ready for that kind of life. And I'm not sure I am." Just then, the door to the office swung open. A young man stepped in simple button-down shirt khakis and an air of quiet humility. His eyes immediately found Eleanor. "Grandma," he said, voice warm. She turned with a wide smile. "Nathan, come meet someone special." Clara stood frozen. "Grandma?" Wait, this was the grandson. Eleanor grinned knowingly. "Clara, This is Nathan. He just started here as an intern. The moment their eyes met, something shifted. The air held a quiet tension, curiosity, maybe something more. And though Clara didn't know it yet, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. For the rest of the afternoon, Nathan shadowed Clara through the corridors of the Whitmore Law Group, quietly assisting her on a complex litigation case. Though he wore the modest label of intern, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him. He asked sharp, insightful questions, not the kind a new hire would typically know to ask. His understanding of legal nuances was impressive, almost unsettlingly so. At first, Clara chalked it up to good instincts, or perhaps obsessive study habits. But deep down, something about his quiet confidence gnawed at her, especially considering how he had arrived with no fanfare and received a direct assignment to her team. Still, she didn't let suspicion cloud her professional courtesy. Instead, she appreciated the strange comfort she found in his presence. He wasn't arrogant like some of the Ivy League hires she'd worked with before. He didn't talk over her or dismiss her ideas. He listened, earnestly. And when he did speak, his thoughts were considered and concise. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt like she wasn't carrying the full weight of a project alone. Meanwhile, Eleanor watched from a distance, moving from room to room with her cleaning cart, but always near enough to eavesdrop. Each time Clara smiled or leaned in to show Nathan a detail on a document, Eleanor's heart swelled with quiet satisfaction. "They're getting along better than I'd hoped," she murmured, her fingers gently gripping the handle of the mop. As the day wore on, Clara's usual guard began to slip. They laughed over an awkward typo in a client memo, shared stories about their toughest professors, and even bonded over their mutual love of classic jazz. Nathan seemed refreshingly normal, humble kind, and deeply thoughtful. But Clara still didn't know the truth. That the man sitting beside her wasn't just an intern, he was the very man whose name was etched on the brass plaque outside the firm's front door. After they wrapped up their work for the evening, Clara's phone buzzed with a call from her mother. She answered softly. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" The older woman's voice burst through the line with excitement. "When are you bringing that boyfriend of yours over? You promised you'd introduce me." Clara's face flushed. I don't have one, Mom," she muttered, glancing at Nathan out of the corner of her eye. Not yet, anyway. As she hung up, she sighed and muttered to herself, "What am I even doing?" But across the office, Eleanor had already made up her mind. Clara didn't know it yet, but she wasn't just part of a case. She was part of a much bigger plan. The following morning, the office buzzed with more than its usual dose of ambition and caffeine. Word had spread Tom Whitmore, the elusive heir to the Whitmore Law Group, was expected to make his first official appearance. Whispers danced between cubicles like wildfire. "Do you think he's already here just watching us?" one junior associate murmured. "They say he's never lost a case," added another. Amid the speculation, Clara returned to her desk, determined to drown out the gossip and focus on the case she was building with Nathan the intern, who had somehow grown surprisingly important in her daily rhythm. Across the office, Lucy Stratton, a sharply dressed associate with a penchant for cutthroat ambition, sat perched at her glass desk like a vulture with lipstick. She had always viewed Clara as background noise, competent perhaps, but not a threat. That had changed. Ever since Nathan arrived, Lucy noticed Clara's growing influence, and worse, the intern's unwavering attention toward her. To Lucy, that wasn't just suspicious, it was insulting. So when Lucy saw Clara walking back from the break room, she pounced. "Well, well," Lucy called out loudly enough for the entire team to hear. "If it isn't the queen of mediocrity." Clara paused mid-step, blinking in confusion. "Don't even think about applying to be on Mr. Whitmore's new team," Lucy sneered. He only recruits from real schools, prestigious ones. You'd be lucky to still be handling minor claims in 6 months. Clara's heart sank, but she didn't flinch. She'd dealt with worse, and she wasn't going to let Lucy rattle her now. "That's enough," came a voice, not loud, but strong and steady. It was Nathan. He had stepped away from his desk and now stood between Clara and Lucy, his posture calm but unyielding. "Clara is one of the most talented attorneys I've worked with, and if Mr. Whitmore values skill and dedication, I'm sure he'd see that too." Lucy narrowed her eyes, sizing him up. "And who exactly do you think you are, intern?" she snapped. "You've barely been here a week." Nathan didn't blink. "Maybe so, but I know character when I see it, and I also know that tearing others down to look bigger doesn't get you anywhere." The tension in the office was palpable. Lucy, caught off guard by the boldness of someone she considered beneath her, scoffed and stormed off, muttering under her breath. The other staff pretended to work, but their glances said everything. Clara stood still, her face a mix of surprise and admiration. When the moment passed, she turned to Nathan, her voice soft. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I don't like seeing good people treated like they don't matter," he replied, giving her that familiar, warm smile. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Clara didn't know Nathan's secret. She didn't know he wasn't just speaking up for a colleague, he was defending the woman his grandmother had handpicked to stand beside him. But she did know this. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't fighting alone. The days that followed marked a subtle yet undeniable change. Nathan and Clara grew closer, not just as colleagues, but as something deeper, something more uncertain and fragile. They worked late into the evenings, shoulder to shoulder, poring over court documents and fine-tuning arguments. Their conversations grew personal. Nathan shared stories of his childhood with his grandmother, the woman who had raised him after his parents were taken in a tragic accident. Clara, in turn, opened up about her disappointments, her guarded heart, and the betrayal that had left her wary of trusting anyone again. It wasn't long before those late nights turned into something more. One evening, under the golden glow of a desolate office lamp, Nathan turned to Clara and asked, "Would you let me take you out for dinner? Just us, no case files." There was a pause, a long breath, and then a smile. "I think I'd like that," she said. As the two grew closer, one pair of eyes followed with growing bitterness. Lucy Stratton, once the firm's rising star and self-proclaimed favorite for Whitmore's inner circle, watched the quiet bloom of their connection with increasing resentment. Her carefully curated ambitions, her every calculated moving-on of it, seemed to matter anymore. Not when Clara, the so-called low-tier lawyer, was not only catching the attention of the firm, but of the mysterious new intern himself. Then came the moment Lucy had been waiting for. While walking past a conference room, she overheard Clara talking to Nathan. It was innocent, just laughter, and the gentle rhythm of two people who had grown too comfortable with one another. But to Lucy, it was ammunition. That night she stayed late and devised her plan. The next morning, panic spread through the office like a virus. A major client filione that Clara and Nathan were assigned to had been corrupted. Memos were altered documents, restructured, and deadlines missed. The entire case, worth millions to the firm's reputation, was now at risk. And then came the whisper from Lucy, her voice syrupy and cool. "It's unfortunate." Maybe Clara and Nathan were too distracted with each other to notice. The insinuation worked. Eyes turned. Doubt crept in. Clara felt it, the sideways glances, the abrupt silences when she walked into a room. Even her direct supervisor began to question her. Lucy, smug and satisfied, had finally punctured the air of confidence around Clara. And for a moment it looked like her plan was working. But what she hadn't anticipated was Nathan. As soon as he reviewed the altered documents, he spotted discrepancies, timestamps that didn't match their editing history files accessed from unfamiliar logins. He worked quietly, methodically, retracing every step until he found exactly what he was looking for. The trap had been set, yes, but the wrong people had been targeted. Nathan didn't confront Lucy, not yet. Instead, he walked down the quiet hallway to Clara's desk, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, and whispered, "We'll fix this. I promise." And behind him, unseen by all, Eleanor watched with narrowed eyes, no longer just a hopeful matchmaker, but a guardian preparing to defend both her grandson's heart and Clara's future. The very next day, as the tension in the office thickened like a summer storm, Nathan knew it was time to act. Clara, though composed on the surface, was clearly shaken. Her voice had lost its usual confidence, her steps were uncertain, and the fire in her eyes dimmed under the weight of suspicion. Nathan had kept his secret long enough, and now, watching Clara silently bear the fallout of Lucy's scheme, he couldn't stay in disguise any longer. The office needed to see who he really was, and Clara deserved the truth. That afternoon, with the floor buzzing over the growing controversy, Nathan stood up from his desk in the common area and raised his voice. "Everyone, may I have your attention for a moment?" Conversations halted. Heads turned. Phones were slowly lowered as Nathan stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. "I know there's been a lot of talk recently about the missing files and who's to blame. Before this goes any further, I need to tell you something important." The room grew still. "I'm not just an intern," he continued. "My real name is Thomas Whitmore." Gasps erupted. A file dropped to the floor. Even Clara, sitting at her desk, froze mid-breath. "Yes," he said, scanning the stunned faces. "As in that Whitmore. I've been working here undercover these past few weeks to observe how the firm operates without the weight of my name hanging over everyone's head. I wanted to see the people, the talent, the real heart of this firm." A stunned silence gripped the room until it was broken by laughter, sharp and mocking. "Please," Lucy sneered, stepping forward with folded arms. "You expect us to believe you're Thomas Whitmore? That's the funniest thing I've heard all year." Nathan didn't waver. "You're free to laugh, Lucy, but that won't change the facts." Clara rushed to him, grabbing his arm, her voice urgent. "Nathan, Tom, what are you doing? This could get you in serious trouble, pretending to be someone else. You could be sued." His eyes softened as he turned to her. "I tried to tell you, Clara. You didn't believe me. I get it, but I couldn't watch you take the blame for something you didn't do." Before Clara could respond, another voice piped up. Mark, her arrogant ex-boyfriend, who had overheard the commotion. "Wow, Clara," he chuckled, strolling up. "You really know how to pick 'em. A delusional intern pretending to be a billionaire CEO. That's a new low even for you." Nathan's jaw tightened, but instead of reacting in anger, he stepped between Mark and Clara. "You can say what you want about me," he said evenly. "But leave Clara out of it." Mark rolled his eyes. "You're nobody. A fake lawyer, a fake Whitmore, what's next?" Nathan's voice dropped to a steely calm. "Careful, Mark. Defamation is still very real. And believe me, I have the resources to remind you of that." Before the exchange could escalate, the HR director suddenly appeared, flanked by 2 security guards. "Mark, you've been terminated," she said firmly. "Effective immediately." The smirk slid from his face. "What? This isn't your first violation," the HR manager continued. "But it will be your last." As Mark was escorted from the building, the rest of the office stood in stunned silence. Clara turned back to Nathan, still reeling. "You really are Tom Whitmore," he nodded solemnly. "And I never meant to deceive you. I just wanted to be seen for who I am, not for my last name." Clara looked at him, caught between disbelief, fear, and something else. Something hopeful. And deep in the shadows of the hallway, Eleanor smiled. The truth was finally out. But the story was far from over. In the days that followed the dramatic reveal, Clara found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotion. Her mind raced between shock, betrayal, admiration, and an undeniable aching confusion. She had fallen for Nathan, the humble, kind-hearted intern who listened, supported, and believed in her when no one else did. Now she was married to Tom Whitmore, the billionaire heir she never expected to cross paths with, much less build a life beside. It was a truth she couldn't ignore, and yet she didn't know how to feel. Every memory suddenly took on a new light, and every compliment he once gave now made her question whether it was real or just part of his plan. Nathan, Tom understood. He didn't push her for answers. He gave her space, waiting quietly and respectfully, carrying the weight of his secret now laid bare. But what neither of them knew was that Eleanor Whitmore, ever the architect behind the curtain, had already devised the next step. One evening, she sent a message to both of them. "Come to the penthouse. It's urgent." When they arrived, Eleanor was stretched across the velvet settee, a shawl wrapped over her shoulders, her complexion pale and drawn. She looked fragile, weak, frighteningly so. Tom rushed to her side, his voice tinged with panic. "Grandma, what's wrong?" She sighed dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. "I'm not well, dear, and I may not have much time left." Clara gasped, her concern genuine. "Have you seen a doctor?" Eleanor shook her head. "This isn't something a doctor can fix," she said solemnly. "It's my heart. But there's one thing I'd like to see before I leave this world: you two married and happy. You belong together, I know it. And Clara, I saw the way you looked at him before you knew who he was. That's the kind of love money can't buy." Clara looked at Tom, her heart thudding. She did love him. That much was clear, but could she forgive the lie? Could she trust that the man standing before her, the billionaire, the CEO, the one who could have had anyone wanted her for her, and not because of a matchmaking scheme? Still, as Eleanor leaned back, her breathing shallow, something shifted in Clara's chest. Love, like truth, is rarely simple. But in the moments that matter, you choose. And so she made her choice. "He'll do it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If we're doing this, let's do it for real." Tom's eyes widened with emotion. "Clara, are you sure?" She nodded slowly, tears brimming. "I'm tired of being afraid. I love you not because you're Tom Whitmore, but because you're you." Eleanor's eyes sparkled. "Then don't wait," she said suddenly, sitting up with surprising strength. "Let's plan something small, intimate. Tomorrow." Tom and Clara exchanged stunned looks. Her frailty seemed to vanish, but neither of them questioned it. They only held hands and smiled, because even if the timing felt like a plot twist, and even if the grandmother was clearly up to her old tricks, the heart of the moment was real, and for now that was enough. The next day unfolded like a dream wrapped in quiet urgency. Despite the short notice, Eleanor had orchestrated everything with military precision. The small ceremony was held at a private garden just outside the Whitmore estate, a space filled with soft lavender polished white chairs and string lights that danced like fireflies. The scent of blooming jasmine floated through the air as Clara walked down a cobblestone path in a simple yet elegant ivory dress, her natural beauty glowing with every step. Tom waited at the altar in a crisp navy suit, eyes locked on her with a mixture of awe and disbelief that this moment was real. The guests were few, only a handful of Eleanor's trusted staff and an officiant, but the emotion in the air felt larger than any ballroom. When they exchanged vows, there were no grand speeches, no lofty promises of perfection, just honesty. Clara's voice quivered as she said, "I didn't fall for your title, Tom. I fell for your kindness, for the man who stood up for me when no one else did." Tom's eyes misted as he replied, "I've been surrounded by people who wanted things from me my whole life. You were the first person who made me feel like I could just be me." As their hands met, and the vows were sealed with a kiss, even Eleanor, who had been dramatically wrapped in a blanket and slumped in a wheelchair minutes earlier, sat a little straighter, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Later that evening, they held a quiet dinner on the balcony of the estate overlooking the city skyline. Clara gazed out over the horizon, the diamond necklace Tom had gifted her, catching the light of the setting sun. "It still feels surreal," she murmured. "Yesterday I was just trying to survive the politics of the office, and now I'm someone's wife." Tom reached over and took her hand. "Not someone's wife, my wife. And I'm still trying to earn that." But as beautiful as the moment was, it wasn't without shadows. Beneath Tom's, joy stirred a persistent unease. He hadn't told Clara everything, not yet. He still hadn't confessed the extent to which Eleanor had orchestrated things. She had pulled every string behind the scenes, even feigned illness to rush their wedding. What if Clara felt tricked again? What if the truth shattered the fragile trust they'd only just rebuilt? Tom turned to his grandmother that night, pulling her aside as Clara spoke with one of the estate's staff. "Grandma," he whispered, "what if she finds out everything you did? What if she thinks we manipulated her?" Eleanor, sipping a glass of wine with surprising vitality, chuckled. "Tommy, love isn't manipulation if the heart's in the right place. I may have nudged things along, but you did the rest. She loves you. And when the time comes, she'll understand." Tom wasn't so sure, but he nodded, pressing that fear down for now. He was married to the woman he loved. And in the quiet hum of twilight, with the city lights below, and Clara beside him, he allowed himself, for just one evening, to believe that love might be enough to outrun the truth. At least until morning. But morning arrived with something far darker than the glow of newlywed bliss. While Tom and Clara were still savoring the quiet rhythm of their new life, coffee mugs in hand, bare feet, brushing against the polished floors of the estate's breakfast nook, a storm was already gathering. At the Whitmore Law Group, Lucy was seething. Clara's rapid ascent from being mocked in break rooms to becoming the wife of the CEO was, in Lucy's mind, an unforgivable betrayal of the hierarchy she had worked so hard to control. And she was done playing polite. She had watched from the sidelines as the firm tiptoed around Clara now. Whispers of Mrs. Whitmore floated through the corridors, followed by forced smiles and suddenly courteous greetings. The same people who once dismissed her were now eager to align themselves with her, and it made Lucy's skin crawl. So when she discovered that Clara and Tom had left for their honeymoon over the weekend, Lucy made her move. Under the guise of preparing a client presentation, Lucy gained access to sensitive files only a handful of people were authorized to view. She doctored them, planting fabricated email threads that made it appear as if Clara had leaked privileged information to a rival firm. She even faked timestamps and logged in after hours using a junior associate's terminal. Then she quietly submitted the evidence to the firm's ethics committee, all while wearing a mask of professional concern. "I didn't want to believe it either," she told the panel, her voice solemn. "But I couldn't ignore what I found. For the sake of the firm, we have to investigate." By the time Tom and Clara returned from a weekend of sunlit walks and shared laughter, a formal complaint had already landed in Clara's inbox. She read it once, then again, her fingers trembling as she clutched the printed accusations. "Leaking client documents," she whispered aloud, disbelief etching every syllable. "I would never," Tom, standing behind her, scanned the paper over her shoulder. His face hardened. "This is Lucy," he said simply. "She's the only one who would go this far." Clara shook her head, panic swirling in her chest. "But the emails, the files, they look real." Tom reached out gently, tilting her chin to face him. "You're not alone in this." "Well, prove it." Still, the damage was already seeping through the walls of the firm. Whispers returned. Sideways glances resurfaced. Employees who once cheered for Clara now grew silent in elevators, unsure where their loyalties lay. Even the board began asking questions, nervous about reputational risk. Eleanor, hearing of the situation, wasted no time. "We're not letting her be crucified over a lie," she said, eyes sharp as steel. She made calls, quietly, powerfully. Legal resources were brought in. A discreet audit of internal access logs was launched. And behind the scenes, Eleanor began collecting every thread that could unravel Lucy's scheme. Clara, meanwhile, found herself trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. It was no longer just about being Tom's wife. It was about clearing her name and proving that she belonged at that firm not because of a ring, but because of who she was. And this time she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everything they had built. The evidence came in like a lifeline. Late one evening, as Clara sat hunched over her laptop, eyes weary from reliving every email and document she'd ever touched, Tom rushed in, holding a printed report from the firm's IT security audit. "We've got her," he said, voice pulsing with urgency. The logs confirmed it. Lucy's credentials had been used to access the sensitive files after hours, and the metadata on the doctored emails traced directly back to her computer. Clara stared at the proof tears welling not from sadness, but sheer relief. The next morning, armed with the audit and security footage, she walked into the ethics committee's conference room and laid everything bare. The room fell silent as the truth unraveled. By the end of the day, Lucy was escorted out, her smirk replaced with shame. Tom stood beside Clara through it all, not as her shield, but as her partner. And in the silence that followed the storm, Clara stood taller than ever, not because she was Mrs. Whitmore, but because she had faced fire and didn't flinch. Never let someone else define your worth. The truth might take time, but it always finds its voice. If Clara's journey moved, you drop a comment below with your favorite moment and tell us. Have you ever had to defend your truth? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that prove grace, courage, and integrity still win in the end.